Greetings from Mork's Saloon tonight. We've had some people interested in seeing how we do our chestnut potato soup, so we decided to shoot a little video to make that a reality. So let's start with the ingredients and then we'll show how this stuff goes in the pot. It's quite simple, and if you watch the butternut squash video or the carrot soup video, it's pretty similar as far as the procedure, and there really aren't very many steps to do. Number one, to do a potato chestnut soup, we need potatoes. And today we have about 4 pounds of potatoes here. You can make just a pound, if you just want to make a small amount. We like to make a big amount and pop it in the freezer so that we don't have to make it all the time. So anyway, you start with potatoes, obviously. And then you'll need some chestnuts. These here are dried chestnuts. You can also use fresh chestnuts. If you're using dried chestnuts, you'll put 1/4 pound of dried chestnuts to every pound of potatoes. That's the ratio. So 1 pound of potatoes, 1/4 pound of chestnuts, if they're dried. If you're using fresh chestnuts, it's 1/2 pound of chestnuts to 1 pound of potatoes, because they do get a little bigger. What happens is you reconstitute these. Basically, the instructions are on the package, but you basically boil them for a little bit and blah blah, and then they, sit for an hour, and then they gain some size, and we'll show you here what that looks like. Again, we just finished that. So what we have here is a example of what these guys look like when you've taken care of reconstituting them. As you can see, they do really gain in size, like double. So again, 1/4 pound of dried or 1/2 pound of fresh makes about the same amount, and these are like, this would be about the same as fresh chestnuts as far as the size. So dried is preferred because they last much longer. The fresh ones you have to be really careful with as far as how long they stay in the refrigerator, and the season's short too. And besides that, you have to follow the instructions on how to cut the cross in them and roast them and all that business. So you know what, go dried. Anyway, besides chestnuts and potatoes, we put in a couple of onions. Again, this is for 4 pounds of potatoes. So you could use 1/2 an onion if you use 1 pound of potatoes. And again, about a celery stick per pound of potatoes. So we have a little bit short here. We could use 4 for 4 pounds of potatoes, but we can spare 3, so we're putting 3 in there. And then we have some carrots that are fairly large. Again, we could use 4, but we're using 3 because this one really counts for 2. So again, one carrot per pound of potatoes. So it's really quite a simple math we're doing here. Then we have a little bit of garlic. You'll use 2 cloves per pound of potatoes. So in this case we have 8, because we have 4 pounds of potatoes. And we're also going to put in a few bay leaves. That's more of an individual thing. One will put flavor in, 2 will put more flavor in. You definitely don't need more than 1 for a pound of potatoes. I'll probably use 1 per pot today. We're going to split this into 2 pots, so I'll probably just put 1 per pot because these are organic. I'm kind of cheap. It's all going to be fine. You don't even need them. You can do it without, but it does change the flavor if you have a little bay leaf in there. And then in addition to that, what we do is we saute it with, you can use theoretically an olive oil. If you do it kind of slow saute. I don't really like that. We tend to not cook too much with olive oil. We like to eat it as salads and eat it that way. Maybe toss it with pasta and that type of thing. For actual cooking, we really like this grass-fed ghee here. It comes from pure Indian. We paid full price for this, so there's no other reason to mention it other than we're happy customers. But it's really good stuff. It's an Indian clarified butter if you're not familiar with it. And this is quite a large jar, but we've actually gone through a jar. We use it to fry eggs, we use it to fry, like saute these things. Can cameraman think of anything else? When we make crepes we might use it?
Everything.
Anything like that,
Yep.
anything you'd put your friggin' canola oil into, which you should be throwing away, like right now. Okay, so this isn't actually open. Well, let me open it because it's actually, if I can, because I'd like to show you guys what it looks like. There we go. So it looks like that on top. The clarified butter, it's basically the milk solids are gone. In fact, if you're allergic to what is it, casein, you might be fine with this because the milk solids are actually gone. Like if you can't do butter, you could do clarified butter.
It's a good moderately high temperature oil.
Yeah, and it can handle it. Yeah. So you stir it a little bit, you get this kind of, you know, it's a little thicker. I mean, the oil ends up on top, but you want to mix it a little when you're taking a scoop, you know, you kind of want to mix it. And if you have Indian food, put this on your Indian food, like a little scoop of this on top, mix it all, well, not with this hand, mix it all up, and it becomes really nice. You can put it on paratha and all sorts of stuff like that. It's really good. So anyway, let's get back to the soup. But this is how you'd kind of want to mix it until you have this kind of consistency, and then put that in your thing. And it's good for you. It's got CLA, omegas, 3s. I eat it. Yes. When it's organic, grass-fed, you don't waste anything. All right. Oh, it didn't, I'm okay. So we're going to go ahead and cut this stuff up, and then peel the potatoes and cut them up, and then we'll get back when it's time to put things in the pot. Although you pretty much don't need any more instructions at this point. But we are going to add a little bouillon, so we'll deal with that when we get things into the pot. So until then, signing off from Mark Saloon. Okay, so we've got our ghee here, ready for the pots. We have the chestnuts. I ran them through the food processor just to break them up a little because they get very, they're good though. They can get a little bit, I wouldn't say tough, but it's nice to get a little more water into them as they cook, because then they'll soften even more, so that when you mix it at the end, everything blends in fine. So it's a good idea to chop them up a little more. You can also do it by hand. And in here I split it because we have 2 pots we're going to put this into. And so we have the onions, and you can use any onion. I mean, we just ran out of white onions, but I usually use like these regular, yellow onions. I usually use those, but you know, if you just end up with these, who gives a? So, as long as it's organic, I don't care what you're putting in there. Potatoes, and again, speaking of organic, please don't make this soup unless you're using organic potatoes, because I don't know if you're aware, but potatoes, conventional potatoes are so, conventional and natural potatoes are so toxic that when they're done harvesting them, they actually need to leave them in a room for a year to detox before they're acceptable for human consumption. That's disgusting to me, but anyway, buy your potatoes organic. Same goes for celery, by the way, so organic celery, or else don't put it in there. Carrots, well, same story. It's not quite as bad as the other 2, but you know what? Just buy them organic. They're really cheap. You can get 5 pounds for $5 at Whole Foods in Manhattan, so you should be able to get some decent carrots. So that's what's in here. The onion, the potatoes, the carrots, and the celery. And this is not an exact science. I mean, you can put a little more of some and a little less of some. It's not a big deal. I have the garlic right here. So what we're going to do, oh, and the bay leaf here. What we're going to do is saute these 2 first with a little bay leaf in ghee. And then after that's been sitting there for just a little bit, we're going to put the chestnut and garlic into the saute and give that a whirl. Then we'll add some bouillon, and then we'll leave it to do its own thing. That's pretty easy. Now if you make a big portion at once, I figure we don't have to make this soup until a month from now, and that includes taking it to lunch. You can put it in Ziplocs, take it to lunch, you know, have it for dinner, just keep it in the freezer. It couldn't be easier. Anyhow, let's get this gas stove cranking here. That's number 1. And too. If you're curious what we have going on in the back here, we actually doing double duty today. We're doing butternut squash soup at the same time. We have two of those, a big and a small, cooking over there. So by the time we're done with this, it should be a pretty good load of soup. So I usually use for my ghee, I use a small spoon because I don't want to waste too much ghee with a spoon. That's granted I could eat it all, but I don't want to eat that much ghee. So I like to lick the small spoon, but not a big spoon. And if you're Indian, you probably think I'm just gobbing this on here. I am. But grass-fed butter is good for you. So it's got the right oils, it's great for you, so there's no reason not to crank up the butter party here. I love that excuse. Okay. So now we're going to turn these down just a bit. There's no reason to stir fry your vegetables. Just saute them. There we go. That was one. And the other. There we go. And then we'll pop a little bay leaf in there. Actually, let's stir it for a moment, and then we'll pop the bay leaf in there. And I think I'm actually going to wait on the bay leaf, because what happens is sometimes, if you're doing this, you have a bay leaf sitting in there, it'll break up, and then when you start making your soup, you have to dig out these pieces before you can blend the soup at the end. You know, you don't want to put pieces of bay leaf in there, they'll get stiff. So I think I'm going to hold off and put the bay leaf in once we put the bouillon, because then it won't get damaged. And then it's easier to fish it out afterwards. So this is really just to coat things a little with the ghee and give it a chance to get a little initial heat built up. So the soup itself shouldn't cook more than maybe 25-30 minutes. So I do cut my pieces, like, I do cut my cucumber, my carrot fairly small, because the carrot can take a while to soften. The potatoes will take no time. But the carrots, it's good to cut them slightly small. So there we go. Let's have a look at the recipe and see if we have anything else we need to do right now. This is only my second time making this, but it's a darn good soup. Yeah, no, then we just do this, and then we add the chestnuts and garlic, and then goes the water and the bouillon. So we can almost do it now. I mean, it's really... Or as the cameraman say, let's get the show on the road. Hey, so we're back. So we're gonna now, this has been sauteing for a little while we made our bouillon, which I'll explain to you in a minute. We're gonna now add the chestnuts. Give them a little whirl through here. That's about half, I think. There we go. And then the garlic also goes in at this point. There we go. There's the garlic. And we'll just give that a spin. And if you're a lazy cook and you just can't figure it out, just put everything in at once. So here's the final mix. Maybe the cameraman can come closer. We'll just give you a little. So that's basically it. Now we live in New York, we don't have a bunch of huge stock pots, and we're trying to make butternut squash soup at the same time. So what we do sometimes is we'll add a little less liquid than the recipe calls for, and then when the soup is finished we can always add more. Because that's what we have to do. I'm not cooking soup 3 times just because the pots are smaller, so it's just going to have to work. So you can make a thicker soup, and then you can even freeze it thicker, and then when you take it out of the freezer you can thicken it, or thin it out with some water. So that's what we have here. So let's put a little salt and pepper in here at the same time. I'm just going to work on that after we're done with the video. I'll just show you what happens in one of these pots, and then I'll repeat after we're done. So a little salt and pepper to taste. You usually put a little bit in the beginning so it can cook in with the dish, and then you can add more to taste at the end, particularly salt. This depends on what bouillon you're using and all that. So some bouillon is more salty, and the strength of your bouillon depends as well. So, and again, a little salt. We love this Himalayan salt. It's pink, full of minerals. It's great salt. The only product I think I own that's made in Pakistan. Hey, Pakistan. So we'll put this much in right now, and then we'll probably add more as we taste it. And then I've got my bay leaves I got to remember here. Now, as far as bouillon, you put 3 cups of bouillon and 3 cups of water for each pound of those potatoes. So stick to that. 1 pound of potatoes, 3 cups of bouillon and 3 cups of water. So 6 cups of liquid total. That's 6. And I don't think we're going to fit everything in. This is the 3 cups of bouillon. Is that correct, Mr. Cameraman?
Yeah, but it's a double.
Okay, right. So I still need to add the same amount of water, which probably won't fit, so we're going to add that after we get through this process. As long as there's enough liquid to cover your potatoes, you're actually fine. You'll just get more of a puree soup. And then when that gets done cooking, you can add your water afterwards. So see, that's about it. So I don't think we're going to add any water right now. We're just going to leave this alone to cook, and then we'll add the water at the end and see how thick we want it. Toss in a bay leaf. Wonderful. And that does it. Happy Saturday from Mork Saloon. Hey, we're still awake here at the Mork Saloon despite getting up at 6:15 this morning, Saturday, to get farm eggs at the farmer's market before they run out. The chickens are molting at the moment. Anyhow, so what we're going to do is we're going to take you through the last steps. Not directly, because we're still working on the project, but so that you can finish getting instructions for how to finish up this thing. You can see it's cooking very nicely, and we're to the point now. Basically, my test for all these soups, whether it's butternut squash or carrot soup or anything, is whether or not things will smash up the side. And like, I have a piece of potato right here, and I'm just smashing it up the side, and the potatoes are basically ready, okay? The carrots, as I said, can be a little more stubborn, and right now they need another 10 minutes. They'll smash, but I have to work at it, and it makes it more difficult when you put the immersion blender in to get everything blended up. So I want to wait on this for about 10 minutes, and here you can see, by adding this bay leaf at the end, it'll be easy to take that out when the soup is done. You just fish that out when the soup is finished in another 10 minutes or so. You just fish out this bay leaf and ditch it and say, adios amigo, it was wonderful to know you. Because you don't want to get that blended into your soup. I mean, you could possibly blend it into small pieces, but I don't think that's a safe bet. So remember to take your bay leaf out. So that's the story with that. So let me just show you now what we're going to do with these, because these I have had sitting here cooling off for about 20 minutes or so. Now, when it comes to smashing things, see, this squash, well, I could show you, I guess, here. It just smashes right there. So you just push it up against the side and it's basically gone. That's easy to get the immersion blender done with if you have something like that. So that's kind of, you're not going to get quite that smashy over here unless you cook it longer than you should. But you just need the carrots to be a little bit more responsive. Butternut squash soup always cooks out more like potatoes as far as their softness. So, so we'll show you now with this soup what we're going to do with that soup when that soup gets done. Because I'm not going to get back on video again tonight, because I just get more and more tired looking. At some point I'm going to start yawning on you, so I don't want to do that. So we'll just take you through the final steps using this as a sample. So here we go. Plug this fella. Whoops. Everything in New York here is tight. You have to know your clearances so you know where you can plug your equipment in. So it's good to stay in the same apartment for years. That way you'll know all your clearances. Okay. So here's an immersion blender for those who haven't seen one. It's got a blade in the bottom. key with this thing is you kind of want to hang out at the bottom of your pot. You don't want to sit and like lift it up, because the moment you lift this up, you'll have soup all over the kitchen. As a matter of fact, as you'll see, there's a flat pan over here. This soup over here will not be blended with this thing in that pan. That's a no-no. This soup will be transferred over here after we're done here, and then it'll be blended here. Because otherwise, we're going to have issues. And I'll be cleaning all night, and that is not what I want to be doing. So, a deep pot is good, like something like, this is perfect for it, but this is not the pot we can use right now. But these are fine, you know, just be careful, don't keep it at the bottom. It may scratch up your, these corners, may scratch up your bottom of the pot a little bit, but you know, you got a pot for cooking, or you got a pot for pretty? That's my question. So, I got my pots for cooking, so I don't really care. Some come with an adjustable speed. This is more basic, but it gets the job done very nicely. So you just stick it in there toward the bottom, and if you kind of hold this one toward the middle and tilt it just a little bit, you actually get sort of a vortex running, which is nice. You also want to remember to cool the soup before you do this, because should you have an accident, you don't want to scald yourself. If you don't have an immersion blender, you can use a regular blender as well. But make sure things are cool enough that you don't have accidents, and never fill it to the top. Always, you know, have room to grow in a blender. Hold on to the lid, all that stuff, you know. This can be really messy, it's orange. So, I'm not going to talk while I do this, because that'll be probably kind of a moot point, so to speak. But, just show you how it looks. And you'll notice that the more it blends, the thicker the soup gets. As you get everything blended in. It'll be more like a puree. And that's because we cover our soups very thick. You know, we don't have room for all that water, so we add the water afterwards. Here's a vortex effect here. Just tilt it a slight bit off the floor, and the soup comes to you. Tilt it toward the middle. So I think we're done. Sometimes there's like a few last chunks in there, so I just want to make sure we got those out. But you can see now we have a fairly thick soup. So let's get a spoon so we can really see what we're doing here. Alright. So for some, this is a very thick soup. For us, it's pretty close to ideal, because we like to eat this particular one with, this is a butternut squash soup, not the chestnut soup. The butternut squash soup here we like to eat with coconut milk and cayenne pepper. And when we put that coconut milk in, it tends to thin it out, because we like a fair amount of coconut milk. So, so we tend to have it like this. But if you plan to eat it more straight, or just with a tiny bit of half and half or a little something, you might want to add some more water to it. But we're gonna freeze this in this consistency here, because that's gonna be about perfect. And then we'll taste to see how the salt situation. You can use a little more salt, but it's really pretty close. So I'll go ahead and add a little more salt after we get done with the video, but it's pretty close to good. So what we're gonna do with this when it gets done is exactly the same thing. And you'll notice that it looks kind of gray now, and you're like, how's that going to be? But I promise you, once you blend this soup, you get a light orange, because the oranges, the carrots, I mean, not oranges. See, I'm getting tired. The carrots in here have enough beta-carotene to turn this chestnut soup into a light orange, and it's actually pretty cool. Even the celery seems to give it a little bit of color, so it's a pretty color. So don't worry about what it's going to look like. My first didn't have carrot; it looked kind of gray, but with the carrot it's beautiful. So put the carrot in. Even if you don't like carrots, put them in anyway. So Anyhow, we're going to sign off here from Mark's Saloon, but next for these is just some quart-size Ziplocs, packed flat, put them in some little container while they freeze in there, and just layer them up, put them in the freezer, and when you're done you have flat packs of soup that thaw like in a heartbeat. So just a word of advice for those who like to have soup for lunch and forget to take it out of the freezer and have to thaw it fast. Just do it that way. So I think that's it for here. Anything else from the cameraman? Nope. Signing off from New York City and Mark's Saloon. Alright, one final clip, because we actually just finished immersing, blending this thing here. This is the color of the potato-chestnut soup. And that's that orange from the, you get that orange from the carrot, and the celery adds a little color too. So that's that. And I think we forgot to mention how you eat it, because some of the soups we have coconut milk and things like that going on. You're welcome to try it, but that's not something that we have any experience with in this soup. This soup just needs enough salt. Once you get the salt level up just to the perfect level, boom, it all comes together. Undersalted soup is awful, so please don't undersalt your soup. Just use a good salt, like, that's good for you also. And you can certainly add more pepper and things like that. If you are into it, you could probably add a little half and half, things like that, but I wouldn't put anything, like some soups we use cayenne pepper and things like that. I don't think we'd mess with that. You could put some, you know, a little thyme or that type of thing in here. Thyme would be good. It's that type of herby. It's more of an herb-friendly soup than anything else. So, up the garlic if you like, you know, those kinds of things, but fairly simple. And this one is a little bit thick because, you know, we're not going to add coconut milk or anything to it, so it's not going to thin out more. So, in this case, we're going to add that extra, not quite as much water as the recipe calls for, because we like them thick, but this is a little bit too thick for, you know, soup. So we're going to add a little more water up to the edge, and then we'll bag it up when it cools off. And you can just go ahead and experiment and enjoy.